And welcome back to another edition of Dear Jane. I am Scott Baker. She is Marcy Little. Marcy, how are you?
Great. Excited for today.
Marcy, do you trust your doctor?
Yeah, I would
Of
say
course you do.
so.
Of course you do. You wouldn't go to your doctor
Yeah.
otherwise. What wouldn't it be interesting? What would you do if every single one of the medical professionals in your life was telling you to get an abortion or to telling you to end your baby's life? You talk about pressure.
Yeah, that's a lot of
Tremendous pressure. We're going to talk
Yeah.
about that today. First, we got to mention our sponsor before we get into it. Our sponsor today is Choose Life Promo. And to tell us about Choose Life Promo, here's Marcy Little.
Choose Life Promo exists to help promote your pro-life organization. So whether you are pro-life in the political space or the pregnancy help center space or whatever space in the pro-life movement your organization takes up, and no matter what your mission is to help end abortion, Choose Life Promo can help with promotion of your organization. So if you have an event coming up, if you have, you're going to be out in the community and you want your volunteers repping your organization, Choose Life Promo has the products and promotional materials that you need to get your name out there, to raise more funds. And they're ready made. They're ready for you to put your logo on them and go. So t-shirts, tumblers, other things like that. Choose Life Promo has you covered. Check them out, chooselifepromo.com.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. So let's get into it. We are pleased to be joined today by Tracy Windsor. Tracy is the co-founder and parent program director of Be Not Afraid. And we're also joined by Hannah North. Hannah is a participant in Be Not Afraid. Tracy, Hannah, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Hi, thank you.
Hannah's story is just amazing, and we hope to touch on that here in just a little bit. But Tracy, let's start with you. Just sort of give people an idea, the sort of the baseline here of Be Not Afraid. What are you all about?
So we started 14 years ago as a direct service for parents. We recognized within our community that there wasn't really an answer for parents with all different kinds of prenatal diagnoses. And so my co-founder and I decided that maybe God was calling us to do something. We didn't honestly think it would work. What we found was that parents who had really good support had really good births. And whether a baby lived or a baby died, those births looked much better than the abortions that might be happening in the same hospital at the time of prenatal diagnosis. So we started getting referrals from the medical community. We became more and more known nationally, and eventually we kind of outgrew our ability to keep up with growth. And so over the last couple of years, we took our model of care, we developed a training based on our model of care, and now we're training other organizations. So far, I think we've trained, what did I say? I checked it just now. I think we have 9 parent care coordinators that we've trained in like 8 different organizations across the country.
Oh, it looked like Marcy froze there, but no, you're on. You're good.
Okay.
So tell us, you're nationwide, right? I mean, you help women all across the country, correct?
We did help when we were serving parents directly. We were serving parents
Mm.
across the country. And now, as I said, we're focused on training and mentoring organizations. So we are training organizations across the country.
Okay. So Hannah is a participant in Be Not Afraid. Hannah's story is remarkable. Hannah's son, Arrow. How old is Arrow now, Hannah?
Arrow is almost 3.5.
Almost 3.5. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Tell us a little bit about your story, Arrow's story, and how it intersects with Be Not Afraid. It's really, really interesting. So please share it with us.
Okay. In 2020, we found out we were pregnant with twins. Um, I, the doctor encouraged me to have the test done to see if he was, to see if what the genders were and if they were identical or not. And that's when the test came back. It said that Arrow had a high risk for trisomy 13. And we waited until the 20-week ultrasound, which found a lot of abnormalities consistent with trisomy 13. So I decided to get an amniocentesis to confirm, because I knew that I was going to carry to term. but I wanted to know how to best, care for him. And it was confirmed at that point. I did not know that it was anything except incompatible with life. I had one friend who gave birth to a son with trisomy 13, and he lived a couple of minutes. And it was a very hard time. I pretty much thought that I was going to have to bury one child and bring one child home. But after doing some research, I found a community online of parents that had chosen to carry to term with a trisomy diagnosis. Some of these children were still living, some weren't, but all of them had no regrets in carrying their child to term. And I heard Be Not Afraid's name mentioned a few times, I felt so alone, and I thought, well, it can't hurt to call. So I called and I talked to Tracy, and that was the first time that I had someone that really felt like I felt so supported and so seen, and so understood, and I had a lot of friends and family that were there for me, but it was just a difference, talking to somebody who knows this world. And so Tracy gave me so much hope, and they walked me through the whole pregnancy and helped to make a birth plan. And I know for a fact that we had such a good experience carrying during the pregnancy, and also the birth experience, and being prepared to make decisions for him because of Be Not Afraid.
Hannah, what was it like receiving that prenatal diagnosis? How was it delivered? What were the follow-up conversations with doctors like?
Well, when it was delivered, I thought I was getting a call to find out that I was having two boys. And then it was just thrown in there. By the way, there's also, high chance that one has trisomy 13. And I was just probably in my kitchen on the phone with my kids running around, and not prepared for that kind of news. Now, then at that point, they did say, this is just diagnostic. There's also a high chance that it's wrong. You'll need to do further testing. But when my doctor confirmed it, he offered selective reduction in the case of twins, and because he had to, but he was actually pro-life himself. So he told me that he was relieved that I was going to carry it to term, but he did not offer any hope. He asked, well, not asked, but he did tell me that his opinion was to not monitor the twin during birth, to make all decisions based on his brother, the healthy twin, and that having a C-section wasn't worth it to save a child that was going to die. And then I went to the fetal maternal specialist, and every single time I went there, they would, are you sure you don't want a selective reduction? I was offered it way too many times. I mean, at some point they did realize, okay, you're carrying. But it was always sad, when they were doing the ultrasounds, they would talk really happy about my healthy twin. And then it was never like, oh, let's look at, he just wasn't celebrated at all. It was a very sad thing.
When you say that the doctor had to, help me understand that. You said he offered you.
Yeah. He said that he had to, offer me my options.
Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm. And he said, this is what it would look like. It's called a selective reduction. He would die, and you would carry him and his twin and deliver them both at birth.
Gotcha. Tracy, Hannah mentioned a birth plan. What is that?
Well, we work with parents, and in our model of care, we respond to the trauma of the diagnosis, which you can kind of see in Hannah's story. And there's a couple of reasons for that we can come back to. But then as we are dealing with the grief or the loss of the pregnancy and baby you thought you were expecting, and then the trauma of the diagnosis, which is generally unexpected and shocking to parents, we focus on what is the next event that's coming, partially to get parents ready, just for the possibility of any number of outcomes. It might be a loss, it might be a baby that lives for a short time, it might be a baby that's coming home. And that's kind of across the board with all different kinds of diagnoses, not just trisomy 13. But the other reason to get parents ready is so that they can be the best possible advocate for their baby. And so we spend a lot of time first knowing parents, understanding what they understand about the diagnosis, what are their strengths and weaknesses, what does their family look like, what do they want. It was very important for Hannah because there were two babies, that these two babies they shared humanity. And even though she was carrying to term, it was very much like one baby. Arrow had just been swept off to the side. We also look at, as we're birth planning, the hospital you're delivering at. What is the willingness there to provide basic care or extraordinary care for the baby that has the prenatal diagnosis? And then we encourage parents to go in and advocate for themselves. We give them talking points. They have a written plan that addresses maybe the first 48 or 72 hours of birth, tries to get them, if this is a live birth and a live baby that goes to NICU, gets them to their first care plan meeting. And that's written and approved before baby comes, so that on the day that they walk in labor, that information is there at the hospital. Ideally, everybody who might look at a Hannah and say, that's a crazy thing to do, removes themselves, right? And anyone who would look at Hannah's birth plan and think, I really feel for this woman. I think I know how important it must be to carry these two babies and love them both. And I respect her desire to give this other little guy a chance at life. Steps into that care. Those are the nurses that want to have the care of her. So we find the birth plan process to be really, really helpful. And it does a lot of good at the hospital setting in terms of kind of creating a community of support around a parent on that most important day when they're welcoming that baby. We're not a medical service, so we always knew, like, we like to be at our births. Often we are at our births for support, but we can't walk in and take anything over. So we really feel like we need to help the parents bring their medical providers along. So that's really what a birth plan is about.
It's incredible to think. I feel like every day I hear new stories that highlight how truly horrible the abortion industry is, and how it's wrecked so many things and infiltrated so many places. You would think, like, in a place where doctors are sworn to give care, that's their calling, that you shouldn't have to fight so hard to say, no, I don't want a selective reduction. I don't want an abortion. I need help, almost to the point where, Tracy, I love your organization and what you guys do, but it seems like if the hospitals and the doctors were doing their jobs, there may not be a need for that if they were able to come alongside women and truly offer the support they need. And to me, it's another indictment on the whole abortion movement and industry, that it has infiltrated so much.
I think that it's certainly clear. I mean, I think when I entered into this work, I did not realize how comfortable the obstetric community had become with abortion. And it's not just about prenatal diagnosis. There's other complications of pregnancy that we can see now. 20 years ago, if you had a rupture, maybe they would see how baby tolerated that rupture. Now it's very common for someone to say, well, there's no hope, so let's just end this pregnancy now and you can try again. So part of it is, that there's this real comfort level in the obstetric community. I think to some extent too, it's just poor education in our medical schools. We have medical research that indicates that it's better emotionally for the mother to carry to term. Even if the baby's going to die, it is better for her, less complicated grief, less trauma around the loss. And certainly for a mom like Hannah, who's got other kids at home, that's important. Doctors don't have that information. Because most parents abort, 80% of parents with a prenatal diagnosis abort, they're more used to the answer of, okay, fine, we'll terminate. They can provide the termination in their hospital. They can bill for that termination. The hospital has become the abortion provider around prenatal diagnosis. So all of these things are confused and complicated. On the good side, when a parent can walk in and is well educated, the research supports giving a baby like Arrow a chance at life, stabilization and evaluation. That would be how he would be treated if there had never been a prenatal diagnosis, if he was just a baby born who looked complicated. if you can send a parent in with the right messaging and they have the research and they're talking about the fact that they're traumatized, people will respond with way more flexibility and caring than we ever expected. And I think probably the case that was most surprising to me, we had a baby who was probably going to have a short life because of absence of lung development. We were able to get a priest into the OR. It was a C-section because they wanted to get to a live birth. A priest, a videographer who was videotaping that baby's baptism and the time maybe parents had 15, 20 minutes of holding him before the heart stopped beating. The priest prayed over him. And at one point he gathered the medical providers that were still there taking care of mom around mom. So you have mom still like laying with a drape, the dad sitting beside her, baby's on top of her. And we see these medical providers come over and pray around this family. If parents know what to ask for, we see a lot of flexibility. So there is a little bit of hope. I think but the hard part is that the pro-life community has to have the right conversation, and we have to know that the pro-choice community is happy to use the life of Arrow and other babies like Arrow as a reason to push for access to abortion.
Hannah, we certainly want to talk about the miracle that is Arrow. And so I don't want to belabor this too much, but I think it is important. So when you were talking to, when your doctors were encouraging you to, what is it, a selective reduction? Is that the term that they use? Okay. I mean, help take us into those conversations a little bit. Was it, what was the level of encouragement or even pressure? Was it, well, this is the right moral thing to do, or how dare you? I mean, what was the level of pressure, at least that you felt?
I would probably say that I'm on the luckier side. I've heard stories worse than mine, where people are pressured or told that their child is suffering. Certainly, if a mother thinks that that abortion is the most compassionate choice for her child, a mother is likely to make that decision because that's a mom's heart, right? We just want what's best for our baby. And a lot of time that's what mothers are told, is that it's the best choice for their baby. I wasn't as much told that. I was just, it was very much implied that my child was not going to live anyway, and that it was okay to just let him go now, and to focus on his twin and just, be done with that one. So, and I think that if I had taken my doctor's, if I had followed his advice to not monitor him, that I wouldn't have him here today. I had to give birth. I had to be induced and give birth early in order to have him birthed alive because he wasn't doing well. So if I'd stopped monitoring him, then I would have lost him before birth.
So you learned. We've seen your story, and it's amazing. So you realize at some point along the way, and I'm trying to remember the details. You realized that Arrow was going to make it, I think, but for a lot of parents, that's not the case. They hear the opposite news. Either one of you, I would like, Hannah, we can start with you, and then Tracy. I mean, that's not the deciding factor. You made it clear that was not going to be the deciding factor for you, right?
Right.
I mean, Tracy, help us understand when that's not the case. Man, that's got to be even more traumatic and have its own special set of challenges.
Well, I think you mentioned trauma, so we know that most parents experience the diagnosis as traumatic. It's 88% of mothers, 83% of dads. And relative to the pressure to abort, we also have research, not pro-life research, but medical research that indicates that doctors use this idea that we can tell already that this baby will die as a means to encourage the uptake of abortion. So parents are more likely to abort if that's the messaging. That's often coupled with kind of another kind of passive coercion, which consists of not explaining that some babies with trisomy 13 live. So we see not only just negative messaging and pressure to abort, but also a real absence of informed consent about what's a realistic expectation. And the truth is, increasingly, the medical community is saying, and the ethics community, medical ethics community, is saying that we should not be shutting doors before baby is born, that a baby should be born and evaluated at birth. A simple example, parents who have a fetal echocardiogram, which is a test to look at baby's heart, may be told this is a terrible heart defect, you should abort now, there's nothing to be done for this baby. They may act on that, but the truth is, if that baby were carried to term, no cardiologist would touch that living child based on that fetal echo. There would be an echocardiogram done on the living child before anybody made any clinical decision for that child. So whereas parents are often told these prenatal tests are sufficient enough for you to make a decision about life and death, a treatment decision at birth would never be based on prenatal testing. So there's a lot of things that are used to pressure families. I think once lethal language is attached, it's really hard to dial it back. So if you've looked at a parent and said, trisomy 13 is lethal, and then you're like, okay, she's going to carry to term, I can't very well walk in there and say, well, actually, let me change the story a little bit. So that label of lethality continues with the baby through the pregnancy. And it impacts things like whether there's fetal monitoring. It's very common for women to be told no fetal monitoring. To some extent, Hannah's, one of the huge benefits for Arrow was that there was a truant. And they couldn't just walk away from kind of basic obstetric care in many cases. They could remove some things, but not everything, because we still had a baby who didn't have a prenatal diagnosis, a typical baby. But for parents where there's just a singlet, one baby, it's very easy to say no monitoring during labor and delivery, no C-section if there's fetal distress, baby's dying. There's actually research that indicates that the trauma of having a baby who you were told was going to die and then that baby doesn't die is as great as the trauma of the prenatal diagnosis, because it's like the second time that the medical community has kind of failed to bring you along or to prepare you in any way. So even though it's good news, it's still a tremendous amount of trauma, because who do you trust? You were told, you were making decisions based on the idea that there was no hope for a baby, and there's hope. Hannah said, I gave her so much hope. When I met Hannah, I couldn't say, Hannah, I know Arrow can live. What I said to her was, he doesn't have a lot of other things going on. With babies with genetic syndromes, there can be a difficult heart, there can be a difficult brain, there can be stomach issues. He was kind of straightforward. So he looked pretty good, as a baby with trisomy 13 looks really robust. I could not tell her he's definitely going to live, but I could tell her, I'm pretty sure they can't tell you yet he's going to die. And that's such a subtle shift. And yet that's generally what our parents say. You gave us so much hope, because we're just willing to say, you know what, we're going to make a plan for this baby to live, because I don't think anybody can tell you otherwise until we meet him. So it's a subtle shift, but it's based on all this lack of information, negative messaging, probably the worst negative messaging. We had a mom with a baby with trisomy 13 where a pediatric provider looked at her and said, you just don't get it. This is a throwaway baby. And that, there you are. And that kind of, whether it's that or just not making certain that parents understand, it's really, in some ways, I think it's more egregious to tell somebody there's no hope somebody's going to die, because there's a million decisions you might make for that baby based on that information versus just one or two. And the first one, most importantly, is how committed am I to get this baby to a live birth? So Hannah had articulated that for both babies, and with antenatal testing where they go in and do, any other twin would have had the benefit of this, go in and do testing to see how babies are doing in utero. Truett was doing great. Arrow was not happy. And so Hannah made the really beautiful decision to give the frailest baby the best chance at life, and delivered them a little early, not terribly early.
I'm blown away by the research you're talking about and the trauma that's associated with prenatal diagnosis and care or lack of care provided by the doctors. What's the answer there? I mean, I'm even thinking like, okay, prenatal diagnoses, we hear so often about them being wrong. What changes need to be made to that? Either one of you, would you say it's worth it to still get the diagnostics done? How do we help with that trauma?
I think that the pro-life community has thought for some time that our answer for the pro-life community was perinatal hospice or perinatal palliative care. And the problem is that the providers of those services are generally the hospitals. And even the most pro-life person who's an employee of a hospital, like Hannah's OB, has to be careful what they say because they have to practice at that hospital. So we can't expect, and we generally find when we're talking to them, perinatal hospice and perinatal palliative care programs will not encourage parents to carry to term. They will not provide informed consent on the benefits of carrying to term or the risks of the abortion that's being considered. So the pro-life community needs to have a response. Often that response has been kind of like, well, maybe this isn't, maybe a really disabled baby isn't what's coming. And we focus on things like, maybe we could fix Arrow. Excuse me, Hannah, for using Arrow, but maybe we could fix Arrow with a fetal surgery, or maybe the diagnosis is wrong. Or maybe he'll be like the best kid we know with Down syndrome and he'll go to community college. The truth is, we in the pro-life community need to have a disability advocacy that says it doesn't matter to us what the diagnosis is. What matters to us is that he's alive inside of you and he's made in the image of God. He's my brother in Christ, and I'm going to take care of his mom. So what we found accidentally 14 years ago was that, we could provide elements of trauma-informed care better than the medical community. And the thing is, now if we can talk about prenatal diagnosis as trauma, then we kind of force the medical community to have the conversation about what's trauma-informed care. That exists, and we know what that is. And it's collaboration and mutuality and respect and connection, and it's giving parents options, and it's providing personalized care. None of those things are happening when a parent gets misinformation, no information, and directive counseling that suggests that abortion is their best option. So, of course, I'm doing this work, and I've got 300 parents like Hannah, but I think that when we step into the crisis and we say, here we are, here's the connection, we're not going anywhere. This is our service. We're going to support you. We're going to get you ready for birth. You didn't know this was going to happen. You've never been on this journey before. We know this journey. So we're going to help you on this uncharted path. We want to help you because you feel traumatized, like you've lost control. We want to help you gain some agency so that you feel like you have the things you need. Part of that is that birth plan to bring along the medical providers so that when Hannah gives birth to Arrow, she feels way more capable and way more likely to be able to be a good advocate for him than she did at the time of the diagnosis. And then fundamentally, we say, this baby is welcomed. This baby belongs to Be Not Afraid. Doesn't matter if he doesn't belong at the children's hospital or he doesn't belong to the pediatric cardiologist. If anybody else doesn't want him, we want him. And it doesn't matter to us the specifics of him. Sometimes I'll say to parents, Arrow's going to have a particular cross that's going to be his to bear his life. When I die, I may well look back and think to myself, it would have been better to have Arrow's cross and not be maybe as capable, right? As valuable in this world than all the other ugly crosses that I may be dragging around most of my life and not be aware of. So I really think connection, personalized connection, comprehensive care works. And we know how to do that. It's called trauma-informed care. It's just a matter of finding the organizations to provide that care. And the other thing is the medical community is like, great, do it. A lot of people thought we would alienate the medical community. We don't. They love Be Not Afraid. They refer to Be Not Afraid. It's fine. And you know what? If they'll be supportive, we're happy to provide the overlay to their care to make certain that parents who are carrying to term have the best possible experience.
Hannah, I want to take a step back just a little bit. We've talked a lot about prenatal diagnosis and the trauma associated with it. Just sort of give us an idea how the rest of us can be helpful and what's not helpful to parents in that situation to say or to do, or, I'm sure people tried to be helpful and probably weren't. And hopefully you had people who were helpful. Just sort of give some of us advice who might know people who might be in that situation.
Um, I'm going to do my best. That's a difficult one because sometimes it feels like nothing you can say is right or do is
No,
right.
that makes
Um,
sense.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um, I think when someone's grieving, you grieve with them, you mourn with them, or you just give them space. It's there's a lot of there's a lot of loss involved, in your dreams, and nothing will ever be the same in your life once you receive a prenatal diagnosis. Even if if your child lives, you're bringing home a severely disabled child, possibly. Um, if your child passes away, you have to live with that mourning and that grief the rest of your life as a mother and as a family. So there's a process of grieving, and it starts with the diagnosis. And I think just recognizing um, that it's very multifaceted and it's very complicated, and just, it was one thing that was unhelpful for me was people um, that just wanted to pray it away or tell me that everything's
Mm.
going to be okay, or told me, stories about their so and so that they knew was given a diagnosis and their baby's fine, healthy. Um, I kind of just wanted people to accept that my baby was not healthy, and that, or
Mhm.
not healthy, but that my baby had a diagnosis, and that was okay. That was how he's created. Um, and that we had a long journey ahead of us. And so we were very blessed we were surrounded by love and people that loved and cared for us and supported us and brought us meals and things like that.
So
And the thing,
that kind of thing is that kind of thing is helpful.
yeah,
Bring it,
recognize that this is hard and
yeah.
that we need support. Yeah.
So coming, because that's what I was gonna ask you. Think of somebody who was really helpful, and how were they helpful? Was it the meals? Was it coming alongside you, just being there to listen?
The most helpful friend I had, she had a daughter with Down syndrome, and she got it, and she
Mm.
would sit with me and say, "How are you feeling today?" Or she was the first person that said to me, "Have you considered the idea that you might bring him home?" And that was hard for me. I hate to say that, but adjusting to the idea of living life with a medically fragile child was a whole nother,
Yeah.
aspect of the trauma, and something that I needed to wrestle with. So she walked beside me. She let me feel all the feelings and just say all the things and be very honest about those feelings. Some of them were very ugly.
Mm.
Some of them I was like, this is an ugly part of my heart, and this is how I feel today. And she just let me. So,
Mm.
Your situation was a little unique because you have twins. How was that journey of, I'm sure that brought a whole different level of complicated emotions of being really excited on the one hand and then maybe apprehensive and sad on the other hand, and were there ways that your family was able to celebrate at all during the pregnancy, or what was that like, carrying twins with different expectations?
yeah, well, we definitely celebrated. I even told, once I announced that our child had a diagnosis, I asked that people would celebrate with us because I didn't know how much time he had, and I thought,
Mm.
if the time in my womb is the only time we have with him, we want that time to be spent loving him and celebrating him. So, um, we I don't know that my children really grasped, what the possibilities. One of my children did, but I don't know. We just took it one day at a time. And now that I look back, I always say it seems like Truett was the child that was meant to be, and Arrow was kind of the extra, but I almost think it was opposite. I think Arrow was meant to be,
Mm.
and Truett was like that extra little gift that God gave us. So, either way, they're both a gift. But
Mhm.
it did give the really interesting perspective of when I was making decisions for Arrow, I could always say, what would I do if I had to make this decision for his brother? And whatever that answer was, why wouldn't that be the answer for Arrow? Because if it's not, then I'm treating him with a prejudice based on his diagnosis. So when it came time to give birth, I said, I mean, not to give birth, but to be induced, I was, I hated to bring Truett into the world early to save his brother. But I thought, if Truett was in distress, would we induce and put Arrow at risk? Absolutely. So it made that part easier.
All right, I'm getting sad here. So let's turn around. How's Arrow today? What makes Arrow happy? How's Arrow doing?
I think having an extra chromosome helps makes him happy. I think people with extra chromosomes have just an extra gift of joy. I mean, he can't do a lot. He can't sit up. He can't really roll around. He's having a hard time grasping toys and stuff, but that's not what gives him worth and value. He brings so much joy into our lives. He's a snuggle bug, and he's smiling and laughing all the time. He has a lot of medical complications and are like, I guess, just trials. He has epilepsy now, and that's our biggest challenge. But we just love him. We just love everything about him. He's like an angel on earth.
Yeah, he's got a purpose. I mean, he absolutely has a purpose.
He speaks to so many people. Many people look at our life and tell us that that they've been encouraged in this or that, and so I just think that he's having a huge impact on the world in his short 3 years already. So
well, and what I love, and I got a little dusty eyed in your video when you talked about at the front end. You talked about, well, when he got the diagnosis, I knew my life was never going to be the same. And at the end of your video said, I'm so glad it's never going to be the same because I can't imagine life without Arrow. That's so cool. I mean, that's awesome. And that's such a heart of a mother.
Yeah. It's and I think it takes a journey. It's a journey to get to that point, hearing that during my pregnancy, I don't know that it might have made me feel encouraged, like, for the future, but it still hurts so bad. But yeah, I mean, every single bit of it's been worth it.
Mm-hmm. Tracy, if groups want to be trained or if they want to find out more, how can they do that?
They can go to our website, benotafraid.net. And we have a training page there. They can fill out a contact form, and I will be in touch with them within 20 minutes, or excuse me, 24 hours. Where did 20 minutes come from?
Wow, anyway, that's good.
That was crazy. I don't know. Maybe God wants me to be in touch within 20 minutes. Who knows? The other thing I was going to say is we have a research page there that has all of the information about prenatal diagnosis and trauma, informed consent and prenatal testing. That's a big problem. One of the reasons that these experiences are traumatic that most parents don't understand, like Hannah. They think they're going to find out boy or girl, and instead they get this, devastating news. And then probably the only other thing worth mentioning, just because we're so focused on Arrow's story, is we support parents, whether they have a Down syndrome diagnosis. The trauma appears to be the same for parents, regardless of whether this is a baby who will have a disability, whether this baby with a heart defect that's going to require surgery and things like that. So we're about taking care of parents around the trauma of the prenatal diagnosis and not necessarily because of certain diagnoses.
The website, you can go check them out, Be Not Afraid. They're also on Facebook. They're also on Instagram. If you go to the website, it's benotafraid.net. Hannah, will you give Arrow some extra love from all of us today? That just,
especially me.
Sure will. I sure will.
That boy's already made an impact. So that's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you guys very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening to Dear Jane. Don't forget to subscribe. Of course, you can find us on all your podcast platforms of choice. Don't forget to follow us on X and Instagram. On behalf of Marcy Little, I'm Scott Baker. Thanks for listening.